around the table very quickly in a minute, but just the usual reminders, please, if you can turn your laptops, etc., onto silent and phones. There's no fire alarm test. Well, is there a fire alarm test planned this afternoon? It didn't happen this morning after all, did it? They're not going to surprise us this afternoon with it. So if the alarm does go off, we will need to evacuate the building following the green emergency exit signs. I don't think there's anything else that I need to cover. I think you're all familiar with how things operate. I don't think we've got a great deal to cover this afternoon, but just to clarify that the agenda was updated following the council's response to some of my week one action points, just to pick up a couple of things that we can cover today and at subsequent sessions relating to the non-strategic allocations. One of which is the update to the sustainability appraisal that was carried out in response to my action point number 2, I think it was. And then also there's the issue about the council's response to action point 14, which I asked whether there were any, based on the latest evidence now available, whether any of the HELA sites that were not allocated in the plan, were now deemed to be suitable and available, and the council's responded to that with a number that they say are suitable and some of which are available, some may or may not be. But 3 of those are in this part of this sub area of the district, I suppose, the Newbury-Thatcham area. So those are the CA 12, 16 and 17 sites, which I know, there's promoters of those who are here. So I'll deal with that as well. Let's just do the introductions, and then I'm just going to cover 2 or 3 sort of general matters before we look specifically at the RSA 1 to 5. So could the council introduce themselves, please?
Emmeline Lambert, Council, West Berkshire.
Vivienne Cole, West Berkshire Council.
Paula Amarelli, West Berkshire Council.
Lila Bassett, West Berkshire Council.
Paul Goddard, West Berkshire Council.
Rachel Lancaster, West Berkshire Council.
Good afternoon, sir. James Isles from Provision, representing a number of different client interests.
Your microphone didn't come on, is it? The battery, try the... Okay.
Trying to keep me quiet before I even get going today. Brilliant. Thank you. Tim Burden from Turley on behalf of Donington New Homes. This afternoon, sir, I'm here with our interest at Long Lane in particular in mind, which is site CA15 and another emission site at Sandford Park South as well. Neither of those are on the list, sir, before you.
No. Right. The extent to which we're dealing with things that aren't on the list, I'll have a think, but I'm going to seek clarification from the council exactly how they went about this exercise and what's on it and what isn't on it. So, and there aren't any direct immediate implications as far as I'm concerned about the sites being on this list. It's just a piece of information that I thought would be helpful in my deliberations in the longer term. Anyway, finally, Nexus.
Yeah, Roger Tustane, Nexus Planning on behalf of Crowd Days Homes.
Okay, thank you. Right, so just before we look at the 5 non-strategic allocations in this site, can we just deal with 3 things? First of all, no particular order. Early on in the response to preliminary questions, I think it was in response to one of my preliminary questions about the strategic policies in the plan, and there seemed to be some duplication between what some of them said and whether they listed non-strategic sites and various. Anyway, the long and short of all that was the council proposed a modification to delete, I can't remember what the reference numbers are, some SP policies that in effect just didn't really add any policy to the plan. They just listed sites that were going to then be allocated further on. So anyway, that's fine, that they were stripped out of that bit. But then to sort of replace that and put it in a more logical place, I suppose, the introduction to each of the sections on the non-strategic sites includes some additional text explaining the context for that sub-area and lists the allocations just in a little table that are then set out in the subsequent pages. So that's just a sort of a tidying up sort of exercise in essence. Yeah. Okay, and those tables they just simply reflect the things that follow. Yeah,
That's correct,
okay.
yes.
Thank you. So that's, I just thought I must just make sure that's all also. There are some sort of general modifications that have been proposed. For example, those agreed in the statement of common ground with Thames Water, which is set out in the schedule exam. Where it is. I can't remember where it is. Exam 23. And it's a sort of standard form of wording. I don't really want to talk about it every time we come across another site, but in general terms, I know it's agreed with Thames Water, but are those changes strictly necessary? I don't know how I'm addressing this to, strictly necessary for soundness, or are they improvements that Thames Water, I mean, you may not, I mean, if you have any observations, let me know. If not, I'll make a judgment about it.
I think Thames Water thought they were for soundness.
Yeah, I
We
think you
weren't-
did go through and list, didn't you?
We did, yes.
Agreed with the ones that were soundness and ones which weren't.
We did. We weren't quite as convinced as they were, but we went with it.
Okay. So you're perfectly happy with this wording being in, but equally, if it wasn't there, you would probably feel the plan could operate in its absence. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay, I'll leave that with me. Yeah, I think I think the Thames Water ones were the ones that are most repetitive, i.e. appearing through a lot of the allocations. So any others I think we'll pick up as we go through because they're a bit more site specific or not as prevalent. So that's that. In terms of the sustainability appraisal update, that was an exercise that, I mean, it was the discussion about the legal compliance of the SA and treating all equivalent appraisal of all potential regional alternatives. You've conducted that exercise and it's set out in the response for each of the allocations that were retained and they're in the plan, which includes all of these 5, doesn't it? So the format, the exercise you went through was exactly the same in that subset as the one you went through for the others. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
That
and
was
those
exactly
take-
the same process as had been done for all the other
Yeah.
sites.
And it doesn't, well, does it provide any different information that alters the justification for any of those allocations?
No, it doesn't.
No. Okay, so it's just a matter of tidying up the sustainability
It
appraisal.
is, yes.
And then you also set out in the introduction to that process about how that would be followed through in the final version of the.
Yes, we just
SA
wanted to
report.
set out how we would then take that forward
Yeah.
to make that process clear.
Okay, that's fine. So unless anybody has any questions about that, I don't think I've got anything further to say now. So finally, in terms of the housing land supply information that I'm using to make judgments about each site and in terms of the overall supply for the district, obviously the plan was submitted using supply data relating to the 1st of April 2022. That's correct, isn't it? You do an annual housing land supply
That's correct, yes.
update based on the information at the 1st of April each year.
It's 31st of March.
31st of
each year.
March
That's
each year,
correct,
yeah.
yes.
So that report is compiled over the summer, autumn, whatever.
This is
and
it. So we do
published.
site visits and then it's just a task of just
Yeah.
checking all the phasing and everything.
Sorry, you do site visits early April?
We're out kind of end of March,
March,
early
early
April, around that time,
Yeah.
yes.
So the point is that it's comprehensive as at the 31st of March, 1st of April, whatever. Yeah.
That's right, yes.
Okay, fine. And then you published a report this year. It was published in February 2024, I think, the update.
Yes, 5-year supply update, yes.
And that's sorry, is that the overall?
Oh, that's our commitments information that's fed into the annual monitoring report.
Right.
And separate to that, we undertake our annual kind of housing land supply checks of now 4-year housing land supply.
Yeah.
And that takes place, we do that towards the end of the year. And we contact promoters and we also take into account information from our commitments exercise.
Right, okay. So the information I was provided was when the plan was submitted, the evidence that was comprehensive relating to 31st of March 2022.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Before the February 2024 housing land supply 5-year, 4-year update, there's another annual monitoring report that's published periodically, is there?
Yes, I think
So it's not been published,
Oh, okay.
no.
No, okay. I don't think it matters too much. What I'm trying to establish is, rather than having, whilst I can see that from the council's point of view, you, for the purposes of dealing with appeals in the past anyway, you would want the latest 5-year housing land supply information at any point during the year, not rely on an annual report. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I think for the purposes of this plan, I just want to deal with information that relates to one point in time. Otherwise, we're going to get very confused about what information we subsequently take account of. So I know, sorry, the reason I'm saying all this is that I think in your written statements for matter 6, you've referred to the comprehensive supply information relating to the 31st of March 2023. And as you know, I've suggested, or one of the options is updating the plan period to be 2023 onward, both for supply purposes and housing requirement purposes. But I think in your matter 6 statements, you also refer to and make some suggested modifications relating to subsequent information based on your site visits in February this year. The problem I have with that is, well, I'd rather just stick with one set of comprehensive information. I know it's probably trying to be helpful because you're updating it to be as up to date as possible, but it becomes then not necessarily equivalent across the whole piece, if you see what I mean. And also I then start running into difficulties. Well, other people may start saying to me, well, there's also something else that's happened since then and this, that and the other. So basically what I'm saying is I think I'd rather just when we talk through each site and whether it, I mean, in essence, it probably doesn't really make any difference, but for example, a couple of times you suggest deleting the modification because of something that's happened since the 1st of April 2023. Whereas if you took the position as at the 31st of March 2023, it would still be in as an allocation. And it would just get difficult adding up equivalent figures and things, I think, if we start doing that. So, any also,
I was just going to ask how you're going to deal with land supply, because clearly when this plan
what?
with land supply, and I don't want to get into the details of the trajectory of land supply now, but clearly in the NPPF, it talks about the inspector fixing a land supply at the end of the examination. That's the point. And then that binds in land supply then for a 5-year period in the council. So it's understanding at what data you're going to use to fix that position at the end of the examination.
It's not only at the end of the examination, is it? Because it refers to the end of the examination and 5-year supply from the date of expected date of adoption. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to work with that. But I think my initial feeling about that is to say, right, you've got to have some comprehensive base to work from, which would be the latest annual statement across the piece, and then look at the trajectory from that point based on what the council and others have said, the extent to which you start factoring in. I mean, an examination would never end if you kept trying to update it. You know what I mean? So I think I'm going to have to take a fairly pragmatic approach to that and say, look, I'm using the comprehensive data at the 1st of April, 31st of March 2023. I mean, in this case, well, I will come on to we're going to deal with those numbers issue. Yeah. But I think that will be my position at the moment, is that the comprehensive information I've got is that 31st of March 2023. So the allocations, whether it's an allocation or not, and the capacity figures will be based on that. When we talk about a 5-year supply trajectory, I may have to think about whether there's any. I mean, I don't have to ignore the subsequent information, and it can help me judge whether what the figure in relating to the 31st of March 2023 is, and what the council's trajectory shows from that point is realistic or not. So sometimes you may say, well, yes, that was the point then, and that's the figure from the starting point, but actually subsequently the trajectory is higher or lower. It's a difficult task, you know, national policy is written and we have to all grapple with it, don't we? So, and it does have, in this instance, it does have quite significant consequences for the next 5 years, which, yeah.
there's no challenge, is there, under the MPPF in terms of certainly tilted balance? So
To balance it, isn't it? I mean, the material consideration is
even
into
to
play,
consideration, yeah,
but it's
but not
different, isn't it?
tilted
But
balance.
we did used to plan without tilted balance, remember?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can now.
It is possible, I think. Which in essence, I think that's what that change to the MPPF is saying, isn't it? But as you quite rightly say, and I'm sure it'll be told to many inspectors on many occasions, the implication for the local plan testing is significant potentially. Yeah, understood. Okay, so so can we bear that point in mind, I think, as we go through these, just to sort of keep a sort of consistent approach to which columns your figures are falling in for my purposes at this point in time. Yeah. Right. Is there anything else about those general matters before we just go through these sites? And I don't think I haven't got many questions about these sites, mainly because they're all either built or underway or committed. So, oh, sorry, I might as well deal with this before I go into them. In terms of nutrient neutrality, several of the sites in this part of the district and elsewhere have a requirement for development to demonstrate mitigation being operational in place before development starts, I think. Obviously, the things moved on with the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act and subsequently secondary legislation. I think my understanding is that it came into effect in January this year. It states that in designated catchments, including the River Lambourne SAC catchment, water companies have a duty to ensure wastewater treatment works serving a population equivalent over 2,000 meet specified nutrient removal standards by the 1st of April 2030. And local planning authorities, considering planning proposals for development draining via CO2, such as treatment works, subject to the upgrade, are required to consider the nutrient pollution standard will be met by the upgrade date. So that applies, does it, to these sites in West Berkshire?
It does, yes.
But I think you say anyway, Thames Water have confirmed that in the case of RSA2, the Newbury wastewater treatment works already has capacity to deal with so there's no mitigation that's required.
No, not for RSA2, no.
Now, so that's Newbury wastewater treatment works. Are some of the other allocations draining to different treatment works?
They are, yes.
Right.
So RSA2 drains into the Newbury works, which actually lies outside the catchment. So
Right.
that's why they're not concerned.
Right.
Some of the other allocations in the AONB do drain into the Lambourne catchment.
To a different treatment works?
Yes,
Or a number of different treatment works?
a number of different ones.
And in those instances, does that 2030 date apply? I.e., you're required to consider that those treatment works will be effective in dealing with the
Yes,
discharge.
yes.
Well, we can go through each one separately, but are they generally ones where there will be some upgrade needed?
Yes,
Right.
but different levels depending on
Yeah.
which treatment works it
Yeah.
drains into, yes.
And all of them are reliant on treatment works mitigation rather than other forms of mitigation, are they? Or again, we can talk through when that arises, but
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you if we could
yeah.
go through that
Yeah, fine, yeah.
for each side.
And obviously why that is relevant in terms of the 2030, I mean, it may or may not affect well, it will affect the trajectory on some of them potentially, I guess, or depending on the timing of the programme. But 2030 obviously is well within the plan period here. So
Yes.
it's unlikely to affect any of the non-strategic allocations in terms of preventing their development during up to 2041. But it could have impact if there's any assumptions about 5-year supply contribution, I suppose.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions anyone's got about, or points about that? So we will pick up those each time, just to check what the position is on each one, because it is different for each one, I think, what we say. Fine, okay. Right, back to where we were this morning at Newbury College, RSA1. I mean, this is a site that's got permission And again, I think it's one way you'd update, you were suggesting an update. So the position at 31st of March 2023, this is probably going to conflict with what we were talking about this morning now, isn't it? No, the permission, the changes to the SP16, the Sandalwood Park allocation, does that affect this site allocation at all? Is there anything you need to make a change as a consequence?
With the boundary?
Yeah.
Do you mean? No, we
No.
checked.
Okay, that's
we
fine.
Checked in the break.
Okay, so there's nothing about this site. This is just going ahead, 15 dwellings. Yep.
So can I update the permission has now lapsed? And then, yeah, and at January 2023, and then there's a revised scheme for a larger quantum of 31 dwelling, which
Oh, yeah.
include additional lands, like this morning talking about. But it's pending determination now.
So the position as at March 31st, 2023, was the permission had lapsed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So based on that information, 15 was your capacity figure and you'll stick with that.
Yeah, so
But-
there's an error in trajectory, we say 16, and then it should be corrected to 15.
15,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so that's fine. Anybody got any comments about that? No? Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, that was the site of interest for me, HSA1. And just briefly, I can confirm that our client Felton Properties still in control of the site. So very much it's deliverable, available. So we're very pleased to see it rolled forward. It was just to emphasise the point in our representations that the evidence base, particularly the housing background paper, is out of date by saying it's an extant permission. It isn't. I know it's a small point, just to be clear in the evidence base, it has lapsed. But for a number of years now, there's been pre-application discussion and now a refreshed application for outline permission. So there's every intention it's going to come forward. Just wanted to concur with the council. They just need to tidy up the evidence base there to show what the official status is and update the evidence base. The main point, though, is that it is definitely available and it's coming forward. And just the final point is that we do see it as a bit of a missed opportunity that the site boundary and capacity hasn't been reviewed. It's part of that big area of change just next door to Sandalwood and the big allocation there. And hence our application has now come in with a revised outline application for 31 units. So there is a greater capacity. There's no technical objections to that. There are ongoing discussions. The application has been approved, admittedly, but in the context of the shortfall in supply of housing, we've just been promoting and making it clear to the council we would support the land that's completely in our control. No technical objections could be brought in for 31 units, and that would boost the supply. Yes, a modest boost, but it would be a boost. Okay. I mean, it's within the settlement boundary, isn't it? So I guess there's no objection in principle from the council to well, I mean, I don't want to preempt their consideration planning application, but it's in principle, it's a location where those additional dwellings, I suppose, would be approved. And just going back to my point, though, I've got to kind of draw a line somewhere where I'm basing the information on. And I think based on situation as at the 31st of March last year, the safest thing is to say the assumption for this site is 15, but you know, in the knowledge that actually that's probably on the low side in this particular instance. So I think I'll just have to leave it at that. That's fair. So yeah, just to confirm, it has got more capacity, but yeah, that's a fair position.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Anything else on RSA 1? No. So RSA 2 is Bath Road, Speen. This we've dealt with the nutrient neutrality. Latest, just what's the 31st of March last year situation with this one then?
So, I think nothing changed. So there's a outline permission, granted in February 2020. And the reserve matters was granted March 2024.
Yeah, so that was
So,
subsequent
yeah.
to that date. So,
Yeah, so it's nothing.
yeah, so it was an
changed.
outline permission.
Yeah, a reserve matters. So
Reserve
that's
matters,
like detailed permission
Yeah.
granted in March 2024.
But at the base date of 31st of March, it was outline.
Oh,
permission.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, fine. Oh, and full permission on part of the site for 11.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, and then the trajectory for that assumes development starts this year, doesn't it? 2024, 25.
So the trajectory, we will refer to exam 22. So we did a revised trajectory. So
what's that
now
trend?
it's, yeah, 2024, 25 is 10 dwellings and then 30 in the subsequent 3
Yeah.
years. Yeah,
So this is one that counts towards the 5-year supply.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Any observations we can make about that? And that's on the and subsequent to 31st of March last year, you've got reserve matters in, and so you still, there's nothing to indicate that things are changing in that score. No, okay, understood. Right, okay, thank you. RSA 3, 75 dwellings at Holy Farm, Newbury. This is a Donington New Home site, I understand. And it was an advanced stage, no, development started in July 2023. And it's an advanced stage when you checked again in February 2024, is that correct?
Correct.
This is one where you proposed a modification on that basis, but I think it's one where let's just leave it as it is and reflect the fact that development hadn't started at 31st of March last year, but the capacity is up to date based on the permission that was in place at that point.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, so that's 75 still, is it? Okay. And that again is presumably one, that's one that's assumed in the 5-year supply, which
Correct.
presumably you're pretty confident about now that it's underway.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
okay, fine. This is another one, this is RSA 4, Greenham Road, Newbury. Development started in September 2022, so the permission had been implemented at that. This is a permission for 157, I think, is it?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And it started in September 2022. It was an advanced stage in February 2024. So
Yeah.
this could be a borderline one, couldn't it? What was the situation at 31st of March 2023? I mean, it doesn't really matter, so long as we keep the figures in a number, the figures don't get lost or they don't appear twice. I don't particularly mind, I don't think, in this case. If it was, what would you, generally your process of deciding to not carry forward allocations, it was on the basis that they were at an advanced stage of development, wasn't it?
That's right.
Was there any sort of judgment, what was the sort of judgment made on that?
We basically do a site visit.
And whether it was what, over halfway or?
Yes, essentially.
So in a site like this, presumably it was around, I'll leave it with you, that one. Okay, I don't really mind. It's just a danger of, don't change things if you have to, I don't think, for my purposes, and obviously avoid any double counting or things falling between stools. I mean, I suppose on some of your sites, when you're adding up your your completions, you'll have some sites that have, there'll be completions on and you'll have outstanding capacity, won't you? So that won't be unique to this. At any point in time, there's going to be some that are in that situation, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So sorry, we've got a trajectory, haven't we, for 31st of March last year that will have a column that's.
Yeah, I include the completion.
No, it's fine. It doesn't worry. I'll leave it with you, but unless it's essential to change the allocation, I think just leave it as it is. Yeah. Okay, then finally, Lower Way Thatcham RSA 5, 85, full permission, then permission. It says full permission was granted in October 2023. So what was the situation at 31st of March? I thought,
So, full planning permission was, granted in January 2023, so we will be a.
oh,
full
January
permission.
2023.
Yeah,
Okay, so that was one that you got, then that's what the 85 is based on.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
91, sorry, 91.
Oh, 91, right, okay. Is that the figure that's in the,
Trajectory.
no, is it the figure that's in the allocation?
The allocation says 85.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's the change that occurred during that between 2022 and 2023, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a change.
So that's one that I think it can be changed because it's an update to the permission, isn't it? That at the relevant base date now, the change base date.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, I'll leave that with you. And this is another one where there's some detailed wording, in this case, Environment Agency involved. Find it now. Your statement refers to modifications to parts G and J agreed with the Environment Agency in Thames Water. Oh, is that the same one as we were talking about before?
Yeah, yes, it would be.
Right, okay. Thank you. Right. I've not got any other comments about those 5 non-strategic allocations, so I'll leave that. Any tinkering with the details, I'll leave with you. I'll have a think about the Thames Water and Environment Agency detail, but I can probably just leave it now. Okay. So that deals with the allocations that are in the plan. In terms of the exercise then that you went through to respond to action point 14, do you want to just explain? I haven't got the wording before me, but I mean, I basically referred to you looking again at what the available proportionate evidence, what you consider to be available proportionate evidence is in the examination library in essence. So that was to take account of information that it was provided in Reg 19 representation. So some subsequent to you decided what to put in the plan and what not to, and etc. So you used that and you went through and you came up with this list of a number of sites that are deemed to be suitable based on that evidence. So that was very helpful. Thank you. We can talk about, well, the 3 today that we have got, but in terms of the exercise that you did, you sort of just briefly outline how you went about that.
Sure. So we used the healer as a starting point with the, in particular, the deliverability tab. So we went through the sites and then considered whether any additional evidence had been submitted at Regulation 19. And we made a judgment as to whether the additional evidence might mean the site is suitable or not. We did have some discussions as well with our highways colleagues because I think it was on the Matter 3 discussion. It was mentioned, like, I think one site we suggested needed to come together with another. Could it be considered independently? So, you know, we considered that as well.
Yes, okay, that was one of the points, wasn't it? Because I did say it considered parts of ones that have been considered as a larger entity in the HELA, because that was some of the points that people were making, that if you actually looked at it slightly differently, you might come to different conclusions. So you looked through so you went through all of the sites again, you looked to see if there was Reg 19 reps, and you then just made an assessment based on those.
Made a judgment, that's right,
made a judgment based on those. Okay, thank you. So let's look at the 3 in this area then, and then, I mean, there may be people who wish to say things about ones that weren't chosen, and, well, you know, it's, you know, I won't hear what is said in general terms, but yeah, sorry, do you want to just?
So I just wonder if it would help if I, you know, hopped in now, because you've asked obviously a pertinent question here, and there doesn't seem to be any paper trail of this process, which is somewhat confusing. I should say, before I say anything else, I don't take any issue with Mr. Tustane's side, which I'm sure we'll get to. But in terms of the HELAR, the conclusion of the HELAR on CA12 is exactly the same as my client's site at CA15. So without understanding the process the council have gone through in this additional sieving exercise, it is really difficult to understand the logic, particularly then if and I made this point the other day, sir, I go back to the essay and the essay scoring and the approach, and I've made various submissions regarding that already, but my client's site was excluded from the process because it was deemed not part of a wider North Newbury or Thatcherman Newbury strategic site. It's really quite a confused paper trail. It's not massively helped by the fact that CA15 wasn't even assessed in the Thatcham growth study, it's a document SIT2, which I know you spent a few days looking at. If you look at page 5 of that document, so my client site isn't even included in that. So the two areas in the essay where my client site is listed hasn't been assessed any further. It's not assessed independently. And the references in the essay refer to sites that are completely geographically irrelevant to my client site. I'll just, again, I'm treading that line here, so with an omission site, as you'll appreciate. But the reality is when you look at the essay and those 5 options for a strategic site, option 4 looks at Hennick, so it covers site CA12, Mr. Tustane's site, CA15, my client's site, CA17, which is, I think, to the south of Mr. Tustane's site, and CA13. And it refers to 250 dwellings as the comprehensive number for the 4 sites. That's plainly not correct, as my client's site's about 230, Mr. Tustane's is a couple of hundred, plus the other 2 sites. So the numbers are wrong in the first place. That site isn't assessed anywhere as a comprehensive development. So I don't understand how that feeds into the assessment process. Then you've got effectively the same 4 sites again as a North East Thatcham and Newark potential strategic site. And I'd urge you, sir, to turn to that page 5 of the Thatcham document, because on that you will see that the other site that's added to it, which is THA20, doesn't actually appear to be assessed on the Thatcham growth study either. Unfortunately, the council's HELAR spreadsheet, the interactive model, which has actually been very useful up until today when I've tried to access it, doesn't work today. But those sites, there is no relationship between any of them. And I suppose getting to the nub of my point here, I cannot understand the assessment process that has been undertaken with respect to my client site, following the paper trail through the SA, following the paper trail through the HELAR, and then subsequently what has come out in the council's recent response. For the reasons I say, my client site scores as well as others. So through you, so I again, treading this line with omission sites, but the paper trail doesn't make sense.
Yeah, sorry, just to be clear then, so if you're taking CA15
Yes.
on its own, you're saying it was never properly assessed on that basis, either originally because of the strategic approach to Thatcham for whatever reason. So when I asked to relook at them, that one wasn't selected. You're saying that, so through the HELAR process and the SA process, it wasn't looked at individually?
Completely so. I mean,
Yeah.
the conclusion, if taking what the council just said as read, that they've gone back through the HELAR, the deliverability tab, so stage 2E of the HELAR, refers to my client site being potentially developable in part. So originally it was promoted for about 350 units in the Reg 18 consultation before. It's dropped now in the Reg 19 submissions to, I think we've got 230 was the number that the master planning exercise did. Now that is the same assessment as Mr. Tustane's site. Apologies, Mr. Tustane. So I don't understand why his site's on the list, mine isn't. Now, there's one difference that I will acknowledge in that there is a comment regarding transport and regarding my client site. But again, trying to understand the assessment, what the council seems to be suggesting in the SA is a wider site would require an access road. But there's no assessment in highways terms on its own. Now, my client, back in response to the December 2020 consultation, so that was one of the many Reg 18 emerging drafts you'll have seen, sir, submitted a transport assessment as part of the documents. I've never seen a response to it. I can't find anything in the examination evidence and documents library regarding transport assessments of individual sites. But the conclusion of that document is paragraph 6.1.5 notes that for my client site alone, based on a capacity of 230 to 260 dwellings, there'll be an impact, there'll be 2 additional vehicles per minute in the morning and evening peak. That is the assessment of that site on its own, and it doesn't identify any significant issues. What I think the council have done in their SA and other assessments is look at the wider entity, whatever that may be, for the reasons I say, that those two SA options don't make any sense on the ground. There is a significant woodland, rising ground, etc., between my client site and the Thatcham site to the east. And a simple look on Google, sir, will make it very clear that there is a very significant area of woodland, let alone the topography between these sites. I just can't follow the paper trail, sir, on a site that is otherwise, found to be potentially developable. So that's the comments with respect of Long Lane, and I'll keep it even shorter in terms of my client's other emission site, which is the land south of Sandford Park, which has been touched on a little bit. That site is identified as NEW8, and I'm failing to see any assessment in any of the documents regarding that site as a potential extension of Sandford Park. The question really is, it'd be really helpful to see the workings of what has gone on behind this note, because I don't think they're there, frankly. And we'll, before we get on to site specifics, one of the sites that's mentioned today is in the AONB. Doesn't follow the spatial strategy, isn't at the most sustainable town in the district. So I'll probably leave it there for now, sir, if I can. Thank you.
I think the AONB issue was wasn't seen as a suitability issue unless there was landscape evidence to say otherwise, I think, wasn't it? Rather than being it may be.
I think it has at some sites. So my question simply for that would be, well, when there's other available sites in more sustainable, less constrained.
Well, leaving the light side,
different point, but,
So the south of Sandalford Park one, tell me what the Hela reference is again. So we've got that.
NEW8.
Newbury 8. Okay, so that was put forward. It was.
It's land to the immediate south of the
allocation. Yeah. Okay. Right. Understood. So, do you want to deal with the sort of process points? Yeah.
Sure, of course. So just a note about the sustainability appraisal. Apparently CA15 was identified as being within that Hennet cluster, but it shouldn't have been. So that's just an error about that. In terms of the work that we did to inform AP14, we can provide that.
So in that work to respond to AP14, you did itemise. You went through all of the HELA individuals. So CA15 would have come out of that, as would NEW8. Yeah, so they're in there, and you've got a revised assessment of the deliverability or developability column.
Yes, that's right. I mean, in terms of the site to the south of Sandalford, we have our appropriate countryside designation study. And so we felt there wasn't any, there wasn't evidence to kind of consider that as suitable. Then in relation to site CA12, there are still outstanding highways issues. And we did actually consider the site alone in the sustainability appraisal. It was a reasonable alternative, but my colleague, Goldad can kind of jump in, but there is a need for additional access. So even on its own, it wouldn't be suitable in highways terms at the moment.
Sorry, when you said CA12 then, I think you meant CA15.
CA12, CA15,
yeah,
sorry.
Okay, okay. Sorry, two things. In terms of the what would I don't want. So you have this paper trail, if you see what I mean, to provide a bit more elaboration on how you've come up with the AP14 response.
That's right.
For
yes.
all of the HELA.
All of them, yes.
Right. Okay. Well, I think if that can be presented in a way, as a freestanding document, it would allow for that paper trail then to be followed.
Can I just query this SA point? So is the council saying that CA15 was incorrectly assessed as one of the 5 options, which I've always suspected might have occurred, sir, and I referred to page 50 of the essay previously, which clearly talks about my client's site. But if you were to move on to page 53 of the essay, it refers to CA15, and it says here 4 sites in Coldash, CA 12, 15, 16, and 17, lie adjacent to the settlement of Thatcham. CA15 does not lie adjacent to Thatcham. So I don't know if they've got the site numbers confused. But again, it just goes back to my point about the paper trail here, so, and the assessment.
Okay, do you want to deal with that? issue?
Yeah, the inclusion of CA15 in that group of sites is an error. It shouldn't be there. It's a typing error, and we can correct that in the next iteration of the essay. It wasn't considered alongside the Hennick sites as part of that group. It wasn't. That's why that site in that bit before is only for 250. It was considered as a site in its own right, on that page in page 50. It's just, I think the wording just needs a little bit of clarification around that. But it is an error that it's included. I think it's to do with the sequence of the numbers, and it's just got, the numbers got translated not quite right.
So can I get this correct, sir? Sorry.
Kind of, yeah.
My client site's been discounted for not being part of a larger site, but it shouldn't have been assessed as a potential option for a strategic site in number 4 or number 5 of the essay proposal, but it's been discounted from further assessment because it was in that list incorrectly. Is that, sounds to me what's being said now, which is a bit concerning.
No, it's not. So the site was not included as part of that Hennick group, although the essay is listed in the site, it wasn't. It was included as an individual site considered for allocation around Newbury. And that's set out in the text above. Table 4 talks about 4 sites in the coal ash area, and CA15 is considered to be a strategic in nature in terms of highways. And so that's why it's being considered separately. It hasn't been considered as part of a group of other sites.
I've got to say, so I'm very confused about how the councillor then decided to not consider my client site further when the basis for not taking it forward is it was supposedly meant to be looked at as part of a future strategic allocation, which is what the essay alludes to and what was discussed at the previous session. So if it's being considered by itself, but it's excluded because it should have been assessed as part of a wider site, it just doesn't work, sir. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so
Sorry.
let's just get to the, in preparing the plan, notwithstanding the errors in the essay, the site CA15 was not chosen as an allocation because,
It's because of the highways
Highways
impact on the
issues.
local highways network. And
so
I think
whilst
on
that may not be clear from what's been, that was the reason. And
that's right.
you're saying that is clear, well, that is evident somewhere in the
It's
HELA.
within and it's mentioned in the HELA, and also it's also covered in the sustainability appraisal.
So that was the reason then. So when you looked at AP14 responding, you again looked at this site CA15 on its own.
That's
and
right.
you will provide a document where these are all listed out separately, presumably, with an assessment of why it was not chosen when you looked at the evidence again, including the highways and whatever evidence has been provided.
That's right. So we liaised with our highways colleagues, and they identified that they still have concerns about the local highway capacity and that there is a need for a new link road.
Okay, so the reason that existed at the time when you prepared the plan that you discarded CA15, you still maintain is the case based
Yes,
on,
that's right.
notwithstanding the evidence that was submitted in support of the site. That's the council's assessment.
Yes.
The Planning and Highway Authority. Okay, fine. Anything you want to add in terms of that?
I would say not at the moment, but I'll answer any further questions if you want details of our concerns at some point. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we may have to leave this for today, unless there's anything further.
The point, sir, would be I'd be grateful if the council could direct me to where that transport work was undertaken, what that route would be, and again, try not to labour the point, but my client site is some distance away from the A339, and I cannot understand or see any geographic ability to link through, not least because land to the north of Newbury has been built out. So north of the Vodafone headquarters building, so you'll have seen if you've been driving around Taylor Wimpey, are building out an area there. I don't think there's a route through, even if the council wanted one. What I don't understand is what's happened to the assessment, the transport assessment my clients did back in 2020, and how that has fed into this process. there is not a transport document in the evidence base apart from a throwaway sentence in the HELA.
You want to,
There was further work done. There was a pre-application.
could you put your microphone down a bit, because I think it's not,
There was some pre-application work completed, well, taken to a certain stage about 2 years ago with Donington New Homes and Highway Consultants Ridge. And there was even a scoping note written on using the council's Newbury Vision model on how to model this site and to what level housing could be provided on CA15 until it had an impact on the highway network. Our concern from the Highway Authority is there's the mini roundabout, double mini roundabout junction to the south with the B4009 Kiln Road to Church Road. That reaches capacity during peak hours, and the Robin Hood gyratory to the south. So therefore, if this site was to be developed as a whole, and also with the ribbon of development that went to the north and linked in north of Vodafone to overcome those highway concerns, because you can't do anything else to those junctions that I've mentioned. There isn't the room to do much more. Was that a link road would be required, and it would connect on to what is called the connection, rather subtly put, but it's the road that goes into Vodafone and serves the housing development that's being built by Taylor Wimpey at the moment to the north, and it would have connected into there. But the work was never concluded, to my knowledge. I'd have to look through my emails whether the vision model was used to progress that work further. But what I've said here, I've said a number of times in feedback to my planning policy colleagues on where our concerns are with this site. Thank you.
right, no, okay, thank you. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll get let's see what the council sort of assessment looks like, and then, that will be published. I'm not committing to any future course of action about dealing with such sites that are emission sites that the council has looked at again and not included, but, at least you'll have a bit more
No,
to look at.
I was just going to say, sir, thank you for accommodating me with this. And just a final point, just to flag that the HELA was based on assessing this site for about 350, and actually it's been promoted now for about 200 in response to some of those comments Mr. Goddard quite rightly flagged. So different process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Right, that's helpful. I think that, it was a very helpful exercise for the council to go through and present in that AB14, but I think having that extra bit of, justification for how it was done, and particularly in terms of demonstrating that, all of the HELA sites were, had a check again at an appropriate geographical scale, if you see what I mean, in terms of extracting ones that could potentially be looked at separately from others. Fine. In terms of ones that could be looked at separately from others, we have a group of 3, CA12, 16 and 17, that appear on the map to be physically related to each other. So the council looked at these, and the CA12 we know has got a promoter. The other 2 were deemed to be developable, but the availability is uncertain at the current time. That's the position, yeah.
Yes, so we have checked with them. The promoter of CA17 has come back to confirm it's still available, and we're just still waiting for confirmation from the promoter of CA16.
Okay, fine. In terms of CA12, that's the larger area of this collection of 3. I'll look at Nexus, yeah.
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm not sure how much history on this you want, really.
No, I don't think I need a great deal.
I think there's a history to the site in terms of planning history, which I think we set out in our statements. In terms of it went to appeal a number of years ago, the planning inspector recommended approval. We had a statement of common ground with the council, with the only issue was contrary to policy. It was effectively a 5-year land supply argument. Our site was recovered by the Secretary of State with one of the North East Thatcham sites, Siege Cross. And because the timescale taken to go through the Secretary of State's processes, another site was approved, which bolstered their land supply. So that was the only real reason the Secretary of State refused our site. Subsequent to that, we've clearly been promoting it through the local plan. We currently have a planning application prepared, and we have a PPA with the council to resolve some relatively minor, I believe, highway issues. Generally, our proposal is it's about 200 dwellings, an 80 bed C2 use. So that's what we're proposing in the planning application.
Okay, and in terms of it being developable, that is on its own without the two adjoining?
It's developable on its own. The proposals which we took through the planning inquiry was it was a standalone site, doesn't prejudice the delivery of the other sites.
So the other two adjoining ones could be
It
developed
could be developed independent of our site.
or
Yeah.
joined into yours if the timing was right?
Potentially, yes.
But either way, it wouldn't affect those in terms of the future. Okay. So again, the update that you provided is, you've put it into the category of being developable. And again, you've got that further bit of background that you'll provide in terms of that. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Anything else on, I don't think I've got any other questions in terms of, I'm not asking the council to suggest what needs to be done about these. It's just a bit of exercise in terms of information gathering at this point in time. So, if you wish to continue to check availability, you could do so. Obviously, that's fine. I don't think I need an update on that, not at the present time anyway. So, but I suppose there may come a point where I may want to consider whether anything further needs to be done in terms of modifying the plan, for example, in terms of, in any way, in terms of the housing land supply. And obviously, if that were the case, this would presumably be relevant to consideration of how that could be done. So this sort of exercise. So I'll say no more than that at this stage. Any other questions, points people wish to make about this? No? Okay. So that deals with everything I think we've got on the agenda. We've got some of these sites, haven't we, in the other areas? So we'll do a similar talk through of those. And so in terms of the extra bit of information you said, when will that be available? Or is that in a form to be published now if needed?
We could probably publish it Monday.
Next week
possibly
sometime.
Next week, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
okay,
fine.
that's fine. So that will just be as an addendum to providing further information about this if that people can refer to as necessary. Okay, thank you for that. Anything further from anyone? No, just in terms of procedural, I'll do this, may as well do it now. I mentioned this morning about the general election and the reserve days that we have booked. And my initial feeling that they're a bit too close to the run up to the election, two of the reserve dates being the 2 days before the election and the other two being the week before that. I mean, the council still of the view that it doesn't think it appropriate to sit in at that time.
The council's thought about it. The council doesn't think there's an issue continuing on those days as a matter of, for example, PERDA doesn't.
Right, okay.
However, there could be resourcing issues, particularly the week of the election, so the first week of July, in terms of rooms and availability of staff and so on. But the council doesn't see any other reason not to continue. But if Sir perfectly happy to move the reserve dates as well.
Yeah, fine. Thank you for that. That's interesting. I mean, in which case, I think I agree in terms of the logistics and just the sheer proximity to the election, the two. But the week before that, I think maybe we will keep as an option. And yeah, keep that as an option, but also maybe we'll continue through Ian to think about whether there's other couple of days that we can earmark at some point before too long. So the fact that it's PERDA doesn't prevent officers coming and talking about the issues with the plan.
No, the council doesn't think so, and has thought about it and has discussed it with the head of legal.
Okay. And no MPs are directly involved, are they, in terms of representations about the plan, I don't think? Well, yeah, I'll leave it with you again, but let's, from what you've said, and thank you for investigating it so promptly, let's leave those days in. The days in end of June, yes, yes. And,
We'll do that. And if anything else arises in the meantime,
Yeah,
then we'll
just
make
keep
sure
us
that
in-
Mr. Kemp
yeah, that's fine.
is kept aware.
Okay, right. Okay, so as I've done previously, I will do a note of any actions arising from this week. I won't try and summarise what they may be. I mean, there was obviously some this morning that were fairly evident that we talked through, did some detailed wording of SP16, didn't we? And there will be some relating to the previous 2 days about North East Thatcham, which I'm sure won't surprise you in terms of some of the things that were, it's clear that it needs a bit more clarity and investigation to allow us to move on. I mean, just to be straightforward about it, the fact that we've got reserve days is exactly usually for picking up any further discussion is needed as a result of any further work such as that. So, I mean, it's, that is on my mind. So, okay, any other further points or queries before we finish? No. So we'll be back, not next week, the week after, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you all, and we'll see some of you again, or most of you again, no doubt.